Both sons were competing to ask me to take care of their grandchildren, and they both thought their father was slow. Helplessly. We drew lots. My husband went to the younger son's house. After a month of making a fuss, the younger daughter-in-law insisted that her father-in-law peeked at her breastfeeding. My husband was so angry that he committed suicide by jumping into a river. But the older son wouldn't let me go to collect his body. Dad is already dead. Don't delay my son's early education class. These are the good sons that my husband and I raised by picking up waste and doing hard labor. I was so angry that I passed out. When I woke up again, I went back to the day when we drew lots. One, the younger daughter-in-law, holding her barely visible lower abdomen, sat on the only sofa with the help of the younger son. I saw with my own eyes that she nudged Sam with her elbow and pouted at me. Sam quickly stood up, full of joy. Mom and Dad, I want to announce a good news. As he said this, the two of them looked at each other and smiled, obviously waiting for us to ask and praise. I immediately said, "Is Jocelyn's lumbar disease finally cured?" "That's great." At a young age, with a protruding belly and a hunched back, it really doesn't look good. When walking on the road, people might think she is older than me. Hearing this, Jocelyn's full pride immediately froze. I waved my hand to interrupt Sam's explanation. "It's okay. I am not the kind of person who would dislike a daughter-in-law when she has a problem. Besides, she is cured now. She can sit on this hard sofa. I guess she will be able to go out and find a job in 2 days." They all understood this. Since she got married, Jocelyn has never sat on the sofa in my house. At first, I thought she was shy. Later, I found out that she disliked the spring of my sofa being too hard. It has a stinky smell of junk. It's disgusting just by smelling it. When my husband heard this, he was sad for several nights. I also felt that I had no ability and lost face in front of my daughter-in-law. Plus, the younger son insisted on buying a house in the most expensive place. So with the same down payment, his house was 11.5 square meters smaller than the older son's. After the daughter-in-law entered the family, she was envious of the large living room of the older son's house. We didn't want to cause family discord, so we compromised everywhere. Just talking about the leather sofa in their living room, I secretly paid in installments of 28,000 yuan. But they lived in the small villa that my husband Charles and I saved up bottle by bottle. They ate the braised pork ribs and stir-fried fish that Charles bought and cooked on the spot. But they still complained that Charles was slow. In order to force me to take care of their child, she actually slandered Charles for peeking at her breastfeeding. Poor old man in my family. He was clumsy with words but kind-hearted all his life. In the end, he was splashed with dirty water by his own grandson's mother. He originally thought that his usually good-tempered younger son would prove his innocence for him. But the younger son lowered his head and only said in a muffled voice, "Dad, you'd better let Mom come. Otherwise, how can your son be a man in the future?" This sentence crushed Charles. He only said okay twice and never came back. In the last surveillance video, this man who didn't bend his back even when carrying 200 cat ties of cement walked out of the community staggering, under the dim streetlight. He bent into a broken bow, desolate and miserable, remembering the back that made me heartbroken in my previous life. I glared angrily at Jocelyn, who was emphasizing that she was pregnant. My voice was as hard as iron. "What's good for us if you are pregnant? Is there just one more mouth to eat for free?" 2. "Mom, how can you say that? What did you say?" They are quite in sync. "But son, didn't you often say that your foreign company job is just superficially glamorous? In fact, you can't even afford Jocelyn's cosmetics, let alone when her father has a birthday or her brother buys a house. Then if you had a child at this time, prenatal checkups, confinement rooms, milk powder, and diapers all cost money everywhere. Can you afford this?" I frowned tightly and hung the sorrow that was engraved in my bones in my previous life on my face. I didn't lie at all in these words. Sam often complained about being poor in order to ask for money. Poor me. I never dreamed that my hard-earned money was defeated by the white-eyed wolf who killed my husband. Now that I said this, I just hoped that the couple would quarrel among themselves. But Jocelyn narrowed her eyes, glanced threateningly at Sam, and still didn't forget her original intention. I don't care. I am pregnant with a child of your Charles's family. When the eldest sister-in-law was pregnant, you immediately moved there. Now her child is already 1.5 years old. You can't be partial. She is still too young. In my previous life, at least she praised the eldest sister-in-law's child for growing up healthily and flattered me for being a good caregiver. Although it still came to drawing lots in the end, at least there was no open conflict between brothers and sisters-in-law. But this time, her blatant sentence, "Other people's children are grandchildren. Could it be that the baby I am carrying is a bastard?" was just heard by the eldest daughter-in-law who had just entered the door. She immediately retorted, "We don't know if what you are carrying is a bastard. But my Jason will cry if he doesn't have grandma to hold him to sleep. I want to see who can pay with their life if the child cries and something bad happens." 3. The eldest daughter-in-law is a tough person. She doesn't talk much, but she is more ruthless than anyone else. In my previous life, the younger son didn't draw me in the lot. Jocelyn immediately made a scene on the spot, and said that if there was no suitable person to take care of her, she wouldn't give birth. The eldest daughter-in-law curved her lips and smiled. She picked up the big iron roller for exercise and rolled it in front of Jocelyn. "Sister-in-law, if you are really worried that this child won't be raised well, it's better to roll here. Have a miscarriage in my house, and let our mom take good care of you." Good heavens! At that time, although she had a smile on her face, there was a cold air shooting out of her eyes. Jocelyn was so scared that she stopped making a sound, and took the opportunity to be persuaded back home by my husband and Sam. In this life, she was so dazed by a series of disappointments that she actually quarreled with her eldest sister-in-law by putting her hands on her hips. One said, "Greed knows no bounds. Don't take advantage without limit." The other retorted, "Your face is as long as a shoehorn. Your chin is as sharp as a hoe. You always think about digging other people's things." The two of them exchanged words one after another. Soon, their saliva was almost splashing on each other's faces. I pulled Charles, who was anxiously rubbing his hands, and quietly watched them go crazy. Sam was so anxious that his face turned red. "Mom, say something quickly. Jocelyn is still pregnant." I was as calm as still water. "What's wrong with having a quarrel when pregnant?" When I was pregnant, I chased after a nail that fell off a tricycle for 2 miles. Besides, a quarrel between sisters-in-law is not the same as a fight between two brothers. I don't have to worry about affecting your career or ruining your brother's official career. What am I afraid of? Hearing this, my eldest son Aaron, who had been only looking down at the newspaper, finally raised his head. He adjusted his glasses and threw out a sentence. "What are you arguing about? Our parents can take care of one child each. Isn't that fine?" Charles was so happy that he slapped his thigh. "Hey! That's right. We are all family. Don't hurt the harmony. For if there really is harmony, can anyone hurt it?" I felt cold and heavy in my heart, watching Charles turn red in the face as he seriously counted what housework he could do. He lost his mother since he was young. He and I are like bitter gourds on the same vine. In those years of picking up waste, in order to save a few bucks, although we were in the city, we never ate a bought meal, let alone bought a decent piece of furniture. For discarded vegetables, we would cut off the rotten parts and still eat them. For stinky fish, we would salt it heavily, and it would be a dish for the new year again. For a broken table and a wardrobe without a door, Charles would pick them up and fix them. They would be good household items again. After having 2 sons one after another, he was so happy that he held the washed little buttocks every day and kissed them. He also picked up 2 sets of desks for them early. "My children will wear clean clothes and do decent jobs in the future." He took a sip of the expired beer that others threw away. There were 2 small sparks in his eyes. "From now on, I will learn everything to set a good example for the children." That hardworking him never dreamed that after exhausting his wife and finally sending his 2 children to college and providing houses, cars, and betrothal gifts, in the end, his skills were deeply disliked by his 2 sons. In this way, in front of their hardworking father, they let their wives scold one by one. When cooking, the hands shake. Who knows if it's Parkinson's? Too slow. Can't fold a quilt in a long time. When the eldest daughter-in-law just got married, Charles helped move the dowry. The calusas on his hand accidentally pulled off a thread of the quilt. The eldest daughter-in-law didn't show any displeasure on the surface. But later, she handed him a pair of disposable gloves. Charles was so embarrassed that his face turned red. But he still had to pretend to be calm in front of his in-laws and his son's leaders and colleagues. At night, he got drunk and lay alone by the sink, repeatedly rubbing his old bark-like hands. Poor man. After a lifetime of hard work carrying cement and picking up waste, how could those cracks and crevices be washed clean? Since then, Charles has developed a problem. His hands shake whenever he touches fabric. Later, when the younger daughter-in-law came to our house for the first time, we invited their whole family to eat at a restaurant. The spoon was slippery and brittle. Charles was in a hurry to fill the bowl for his in-laws. Inevitably, there was a tinkling sound. After seeing off the guests, Sam came back with red eyes and took out a table etiquette book with illustrations for his father. Charles read that book under the light all night. After that, when cooking, whenever he waved the spatula halfway, he would suddenly freeze. Then his hand would droop like a broken tendon. I felt heartbroken. That man who could hold down the rain cloth with both hands and cover all our belongings on a rainy day had shrunk into a withered old tree root in front of the younger generation. But they still disliked him. They still looked down on him. Those 2 beasts who grew up only by sucking Charles's blood actually dared to propose. Let's draw lots. Whoever draws dad will consider himself unlucky. I was so angry that all the blood in my body rushed to my head. Taking a slight horse stance, I slapped both sides with 2 slaps and knocked the 2 bastards backward. Get out. All of you. From now on, whoever gives birth will take care of their own child. Whether they live or die has nothing to do with me. 5. This really stirred up a hornet's nest. Aaron covered his red face and dragged his wife away. Before leaving, he threw out a sentence. Mom, it's fine that you didn't have time to accompany us when we were young. Do you also want to miss Jason's growth? Jocelyn is a girl who grew up in a small grocery store. She took off her famous brand coat and put her hands on her waist. Her shrewd nature was fully revealed. If you want to hit me, just say so. Why hit my husband? He has never raised his voice to you. Don't say I didn't warn you. The eldest sister-in-law is an only child. It's hard to say whose grandson Jason will be in the future. If you don't take care of me now, don't regret it when there is no one to take care of you in your old age and after you die. As soon as these words were spoken, my son, who has never raised his voice, seemed to have found his allies. With his head held high and eyes glaring, he was full of grievances and resentments. Obviously, at this moment, his wife was the good person who loved him, protected him, and stood up for him to seek justice. Suddenly, I didn't want to say anything anymore. It's my incompetence to have raised such a son. But Charles still blamed himself. Alas, it's all because I am clumsy. You said that, Jocelyn. Wouldn't she be so impulsive as to have an abortion? The 30-square-meter rented house seemed empty again. Charles squatted by the sofa that Jocelyn disliked and looked at me expectantly. Maybe I should go practice this skill again tomorrow? If things really get serious, others will definitely laugh at our messy family. Looking at his uncomfortable yet forced smile, the sadness in my heart could no longer be suppressed and tears welled up. You are still thinking about serving them. These 2 unfilial sons actually want your life. 6. Choking with sobs. I told Charles everything that happened in my previous life. But Charles couldn't accept it. His greatest wish in this life is that his children will not suffer as much as he did when he was young. Having clothes to wear, books to read, and meat to eat. This is already the best life he can give his children. Now one child is in a foreign company and the other is in a government job. Even though we are still living in a rented house, we can still hold our heads high when we go out. Hearing that the children he cherished in his palms were so heartless, Charles was so angry that he wanted to quarrel with me. As a mother, it's fine to have a few arguments with your daughter-in-law, but you can't slander the children like this. In my previous life, he was the same. When I didn't agree to draw lots and only agreed to rent a bigger house and bring both children to be raised together, Charles sulked. If our children are in trouble and we don't help them, are we still parents? I didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I could only privately tell my two sons that no matter who drew their father, they had to treat their father well. That bastard Sam vowed to make me feel at ease, but then he let his wife mistreat Charles. Aaron is also not a good person. He lies on a high bed with soft pillows every day. I even handed him hangover soup. After the old man died, he wouldn't let me collect his body. He said, "Dad is already dead. What's the point of you going to collect his body now? It will only delay Jason's early education class." A 1.5-year-old kid, having snacks with a group of foreigners with yellow hair and green eyes and chattering. Such a little thing is actually less important than collecting the body of his father who has been extremely kind to him. I was so angry that I felt dizzy and spat out two mouthfuls of old blood before I finally arrived at the funeral home. Jocelyn actually had the nerve to ask me for mental damage compensation. My Charles. His face was swollen and translucent, and his eyes were wide open looking at the sky. He died with his eyes open, remembering the ugly scene of the two bastards fighting over the inheritance as soon as I passed out in anger. I forced myself to hold back my tears and begged Charles, "Just listen to me this once. If it is proved that they are truly filial, we will go and help them. If they are really not good people, you also promise me not to be sad. We can find a good place to retire by ourselves. Do you think it's feasible?" 7. Where is there a need for proof? After that, for 3 consecutive months, the two sons didn't even make a single phone call. Only Jason sent a voice message. Charles was really happy. But when he heard "Grandma, why didn't you pay our electricity bill?" Jason's ice cream has melted. His face darkened. I didn't say anything either. My heart was as bitter as if I had eaten Coptis chinensis. Who could have thought? Raising children to provide for old age. I raised them only to raise two enemies. After another 2 months, Jocelyn finally came to our door. Charles didn't even have time to wipe the sweat on his forehead. He quickly brought the washed sunshine roses that he had peeled one by one in front of the pregnant woman. Jocelyn folded her arms across her chest and tapped her red nails on her arms. "Let's draw lots. Whoever draws Dad has to accept it. But let's make it clear first. No matter whose house Dad goes to, he has to contribute 1,000 yuan for food expenses. This is the agreement that I and the eldest sister-in-law finally reached after a lot of effort. If you two still don't agree, don't blame us for being ruthless if there is no grandson to break the earthenware basin and carry the guiding flag. Is there anyone who talks like this? Does it mean that we have to bring our own salary and beg you to serve you?" I rushed to the bathroom in one step, picked up the basin of water that I had saved to flush the toilet and splashed it in her face. "I don't want to go to hell if the thing born by a person like you carries the guiding flag. I would rather have no descendants than have descendants like you." At seeing my unprecedentedly tough attitude, the two sons finally realized that something seemed wrong. Aaron jumped out first. "The younger one is ignorant, but I didn't offend you. Jason is really at a critical stage of preschool education. Aren't you afraid of affecting his future if you just leave like this? It's so ridiculous. What do your two sons have to do with me? What? Are you so used to being a big shot that you can't stand it without a maid to serve you?" Sam only knows how to play the sympathy card. "Look, Jocelyn is so pregnant, but she can't even have a hot meal. Mom, you are the kindest. You have suffered before. You must not want the younger generation to suffer again, right? Do you know it's the younger generation now?" When his wife rides on his head and asks Charles to buy this and wash that and slander him every day. Why didn't he know it? I was too lazy to argue with him about Jocelyn not having a job and being idle and lazy all day. I just picked up a broom and beat them to drive them away. As soon as the door opened, Jocelyn, who was eavesdropping, pouted so much that she could hang an oil bottle. Okay. I agree that Dad can come to my place. Are you satisfied now? No. What a surprise. Her Majesty the Queen is so merciful. Unfortunately, I am not as easy to deceive as Charles. What? Are you disabled with no hands or feet? No one in your natal family? Is your husband paralyzed? As a daughter-in-law, you always think about having your father-in-law take care of you. Is your mind grown from a cesspool? I shook my head and sighed. I really want to know where your parents gave birth to you. As soon as these words came out, Jocelyn was defeated. Her face turned pale and her eyes reddened. She lowered her head and was about to bump into me. I was originally trying to anger her, so of course I added fuel to the fire. What? Are you going to cause a one death and to live situation in my house so as to frame and blame me? TSK. Sam. I'm not saying anything else. You better make sure if this child is yours before coming to my house again. Oh, the situation is even more out of control. Jocelyn didn't know whether to bump into me or not. After swearing at my ancestors for 18 generations with her mouth full of vulgar language, I wasn't angry either. As a person who picks up waste, what harsh words haven't I heard? But it's quite interesting that when they were swearing, they kept mentioning my property. Listening to it was funny. I also folded my arms across my chest and asked them coldly, "Who did you hear from? We still have valuable things hidden?" 10 As soon as Jocelyn heard this, she pouted her big belly and was about to step forward to argue. Sam quickly pulled her and forced out a bunch of smiles. No. Moan. I just heard that selling waste is actually quite profitable. You and Dad have been picking up and collecting waste these years. It's reasonable to have some property for retirement. We just ask. Property? I laughed so hard that I almost fell over. Are you talking about this one bedroom? One living room that we have rented for 11 years without tiles or whitewash it? Or this big dining table with 3 legs of different colors? Or this stainless steel chirac that is peeling and missing a leg? I smashed one thing as I asked one thing. I am also a person who can carry 2 sacks of waste. Smashing the white-eyed wolves I raised is even easier. But it's sad to think about it. The children I have been reluctant to scold for so many years are now eagerly calculating us, fearing that there is still a drop of blood left in us that hasn't been sucked dry. The more I smashed, the colder my heart became. The more I scolded, the more desperate I became. Looking at Sam, who was about to turn hostile, I shouted loudly towards the door, "Come in, all of you. What are you hiding like mice for? This time, I will make it clear to you all at once. 11 in my previous life, when I was not completely dead, I heard them arguing about my treasure. In this life, I finally know what it is for." Jocelyn took out a small laminated photo from her bag. It was a newspaper clipping from 25 years ago. At that time, the pixels were not very good. Only a person lying on the ground could be seen. And there was a large pool of blood in the distance. The caption was, "Fighting with the gangster." 14 stabs were all fatal. The junk collector is actually a real hero. The exclamation marks were bold and blackened. The thrilling events across 2 lifetimes and 25 years came straight to my eyes. I was completely stunned. My lips trembled involuntarily. And even my teeth were chattering. Charles quickly came over and firmly held my hand. Jocelyn couldn't hide her pride. "Now you should admit it. Right?" The news said that Dad had just come out of selling waste at that time. No matter how others stabbed him, he just held onto the bag on his chest and wouldn't let go. When the police asked him later why, he was so scared that he could only keep repeating, "Treasure. No one can take my treasure." I won't mention that I entered the family later. The eldest sister-in-law has been in the family for so many years. And we haven't seen you take it out and show it to us. Didn't you always say that you could give your lives for your children? Why are you hiding it now? The small house was filled with people, but not even a sound of breathing could be heard clearly. I hunched over and felt weak, looking at them one by one. They were either expectant or excited, staring at me intently. These children that I raised by selling everything and risking my life. They were staring at me like this, making me feel colder than that night 25 years ago. Taking a deep breath, I decided to tell all the truth. But then I heard a dull and strange gurgling sound. It was Charles. His eyes rolled back, and he fell to the ground limply. 12 I exclaimed and quickly squatted down to pull him. But I couldn't pull him at all. He had already slipped to the ground along the wall. His face quickly turned bluish-black and his teeth were clenched tightly. I panicked and looked up and shouted, "Hurry up and send him to the hospital. Your dad has heart disease." "What?" Pretending to be sick, if you don't want to tell the truth? I must say, you two have watched too many TV dramas. It was Jocelyn. She stroked her belly, and her red nails flashed with a menacing light. I was extremely worried and looked at Sam. Sam smiled and said, "Mom, I haven't heard that Dad has heart disease either." I then looked at Aaron. Aaron adjusted his glasses, coughed dryly, and looked elsewhere with his glasses. "If you have something to say, just tell us. I am the eldest son and have the right to know." "Fine. These are the good sons we raised through hardships. This is not only about asking for money but also taking lives." My hand was shaking violently as I knelt down to drag Charles. Charles could no longer open his eyes. His mouth was crooked to one side, looking like he was crying and laughing at the same time. I was so panicked. After being reborn, it's not easy to live again after all. If I still couldn't keep the old man, then I might as well split myself with a scrap iron. After finally dragging the old man to the door, a pair of shiny high heels blocked our way. I looked up and it was the eldest daughter-in-law. She lowered her eyes and said casually, "Mom, old people are bound to have accidents. You better hand over the things first." I staggered and looked at the eldest son again. The eldest son didn't look at me and only said that the ambulance had been called. "If you have anything to say, you'd better tell us first." "That's right. Otherwise, if it delays Ad's treatment, don't blame us." They one after another, one voice after another, unprecedentedly in harmony. At this moment, I really wish Charles could open his eyes and see. "Your dearest sons and daughters-in-law have finally united as you hoped. Unfortunately, it is to force us to hand over the treasure. All those sorrows, pains, grievances, and angers welled up." I sat down on the ground, held Charles's hand tightly, stared fixedly at these blood-sucking beasts, and my eyes shot out fire. "You want the treasure, right? Fine. I'll fulfill your wish. 13. But today you have to write a written agreement. If you get this treasure, you will sever the parent-child relationship with us from now on. From now on. In life, old age, sickness, and death, we have nothing to do with each other anymore." Of course they were willing. All of Charles's and my possessions had been given to them for marriage and having children. Who wouldn't like to squeeze out all the benefits and then get rid of the burden? When I saw them take the pen and paper I had prepared in advance and write quickly, I sneered and took out a small bundle from the bedroom and threw it on the ground. The few of them were like dogs seeing bones and swarmed over. Jocelyn was slow due to her big belly, pushed by the eldest daughter-in-law's shoulder. She immediately fell to one side. But Sam had no time to take care of her either, busy with a dog-eating fall. He pressed his whole body on the bundle. The bundle was tightly wrapped, layer after layer. I didn't say anything either. I watched them widen their eyes and tear off layer by layer in a rush. When they could faintly see the outline inside after tearing off some layers, the two brothers finally started arguing. The eldest brother puffed up his beard and showed his seniority, saying that he was the eldest son and direct descendant. The younger brother said that it was his wife who thought of a way to force the question out, and should be credited with the first merit. Looking back, he saw the eldest daughter-in-law hold a kitchen knife and brush it past the younger brother's chest. She effortlessly snatched the treasure into her hand. She then threw the knife to the eldest brother. "You go and guard the younger brother's wife. A person with such a big belly If she gets frightened and has a miscarriage, no one can take responsibility. Good heavens. This is a hero. The younger brother's family is tough but afraid of those who are desperate. They could only look unconvinced and take out their phones to record the unboxing video. When the tattered little black bag was revealed, it felt like everyone stopped breathing. There were 2 zippers, and one of them was broken. There were 2 pockets with several holes. You could see through it at a glance. There was nothing inside. 14. The eldest daughter-in-law didn't believe it. Her eyes were wide open. She searched back and forth twice. The eldest brother couldn't hold back. He threw away the kitchen knife and helped search. Finally, he shook out a small to finger-wide note that fluttered and fell to the ground. Jocelyn let out a scream and pounced on it. She was kicked aside by the eldest daughter-in-law. She covered her stomach and let out a scream and fell to the ground. Her eyes were full of resentment. The younger brother was only busy snatching the note with the eldest brother. One's glasses were knocked off and one's head made a bang. But neither of them had time to care. They only glared at each other with their hands that didn't give in. They snorted and looked at the note together. The note had been around for many years and was already yellowed and brittle. There were a few crooked words on it. And there was also opinion. Dad. You are so hard-working xinku. The eldest brother still wasn't reconciled. He turned it over and over again to see if there were any other words. The younger brother was already stunned. He stood there with his mouth open and gasped. The eldest daughter-in-law frowned tightly. Mom. Is it interesting for you to keep such a trick up your sleeve? Where did the treasure in this bag go? Treasure? The treasure is this black bag. Why? Didn't your husband tell you? I sneered and forced myself to speak clearly and coldly by pinching the tiger's mouth on my hand. This is the precious prize your husband got when he got the first place in the school for the first time. Look. At that time, there was a silly boy who didn't want to be outdone. He wrote a letter to his father crookedly. What did he say? I squatted in front of Sam, gritted my teeth, and said word by word, Say. What did you promise your father? 15. That winter, the transfer student Baron entered and got the first place in the grade. The principal, who didn't want to accept him at first, personally rewarded him with a black shoulder bag. He brought it back, smiling and shouting, Dad, when I read books and earn money, you will never have to rummage through the trash can again. Charles wasn't told at that time. He held the bag and looked at it again and again. Then he picked up the eldest son and spun him around the yard. The younger son was jealous. He wrote a note to Charles with a pencil. He promised, Dad, I will be more successful than my elder brother. I will take you to enjoy happiness then. Charles was so happy. He sat under the light, sucking his teeth. He looked at the bag and then touched the note. I sat next to him and listened to and planned which high school and which university the children would go to. Then we would find wives for each of them and have 2 lively and tiger-like babies. We chatted like this. We urged him to deliver the goods only when it was completely dark. Who knew that someone had already been eyeing him? Not only did they rob him of his payment for goods, but they also wanted to take the bag on his chest. Charles refused to let go no matter what. He was stabbed 14 times by others while protecting the bag. Later, when the police asked him, what valuable thing was in the bag? Was it worth him risking his life? Charles grinned stupidly. Treasure. It's a treasure. Charles. Ah, Charles. The treasure you cherish like your eyeballs is now taking your life. Hearing the sound of the ambulance outside the door, I relaxed and scrambled out. Help. Ungrateful sons are going to force their parents to death. 16. Charles's condition was more serious than I expected. Although he had taken quick-acting heart-saving pills in advance, the doctor said that he was too shocked and was almost unable to be saved. I was extremely frightened, and my heart was filled with towering anger. Originally, I just wanted to expose their true faces and make Charles give up hope. Who could have thought that those 2 bastards could be so confused that they couldn't even recognize their own things? When the ambulance arrived, they actually had the nerve to say that Charles was too angry and put all the blame on Jocelyn. Jocelyn couldn't argue because her stomach was in severe pain and she was also put on the ambulance. But I didn't feel relieved at all. I immediately sent the secretly filmed video to Aaron's work unit. He came to me with a livid face. "We are mother and son. Do you have to push me to a dead end? I never asked you to come and work at home. I never held you back from going to the younger son's house. Do you have to be so relentless?" Yes. He never asked me. He just came back with his head down and said that his classmates laughed at him as the trash king. So we hurriedly rented a storefront and did business properly. For steel bars weighing hundreds of tons, Charles and I unloaded them with gritted teeth. In the sweltering dog days, we went to the construction site to collect construction waste. When we saw a tap, we took a big gulp. Then we drank a bottle of Huo Xiangzhengqi liquid. He just sighed and said that other colleagues had all bought the unit's pooled housing. So we took out our savings of half a lifetime and made a down payment for a 128 square meter house for him. Later, there were betrothal gifts, weddings, and taking care of children. We did everything we could. Finally, we gave him the same car and house as others. He had parents who do business, and a decent life. But when he received my letter, the leader widened his eyes. "You two are so hardworking. It shouldn't be like this." Last time he also told me that if you casually do some business transactions, you can earn a lot in a year. Thinking of the comfortable and enjoyable life that my leader thought I had, I laughed until tears came out. "Why? Can't you stand it anymore? What will you do when others know that you, the dignified official, are actually the son of a rapist?" 17. What? Impossible. Don't talk nonsense. He was suddenly defeated. His face was as gloomy as if water could drip. He grabbed my collar. Finally, he couldn't pretend anymore. In my previous life, as a beneficiary, he enjoyed my service but didn't even let me collect the old man's body. He also blamed his younger brother everywhere and created a good image of himself as noble and unselfish and never competing with others. Now that he has been exposed, is he so angry and ashamed? I still smiled and calmly told him, "That year, I had a miscarriage because I was too tired from work. I happened to pick you up from the trash can outside the hospital. You were just born. Your mother couldn't bear it and secretly came to our house to see you. Only then did we know that your real father is really not a good person. He dragged an 18-year-old girl into the woods at night. After that, he even threatened to kill her whole family. Now it seems that you are really the same kind. You are all so heartless." I gritted my teeth and recounted all the past events. Looking at his broken and gray face, I only felt extremely relieved. After a long time, he released my collar, swallowed, and spoke with difficulty. "Then, you didn't tell our leader about this, did you?" I was puzzled. Why should I tell him? Nowadays, when there is something wrong, isn't it popular to post it online? A teen when business is not busy. I like to pick up waste at universities. The students are kind-hearted and always save bottles and books for me. Seeing that they didn't mind, I would also make some snacks from home for them. That day, when they heard about my story, they volunteered to help me. Within a few days, Aaron's heartless act of trying to force his father to death for money caused a huge uproar online. His father-in-law is an official and found many people to mediate. The eldest daughter-in-law even held Jason and came to apologize and shed tears in front of me. "Mom, please let the child's father go. If this continues, he will lose his job. How will Jason face others in the future?" Look, now she knows she's afraid. Unfortunately, things are no longer in my control. When the note and swaddling clothes left by Aaron's biological mother back then were posted online, people started discussing genetic issues. If a person is bad by nature, how can they still be an official? I heard that Aaron was talked to by the Discipline Inspection Commission and is waiting for the next step of handling. I was just persuading Charles to take good care of his health and not worry about these unimportant matters when some pushed Jocelyn and knelt down at our doorstep. He started speaking with tears in his eyes. "Mom and Dad, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have listened to this woman's instigation and doubted you. I'll deal with her right now. Please forgive me. Okay?" 19 Sam has always been smart and good at reading people's expressions. Obviously. He was frightened by his elder brother's fate. He frowned and scolded Jocelyn, apologized to my parents quickly. Asked them to forgive you for the sake of the grandchild in your belly. Jocelyn's face was full of tears. Supporting her belly. She cowed out Ed with difficulty. Mom and Dad. It's all my fault. From now on, I will never cause trouble again. For the house of my elder brother and sister-in-law. If you take it back, you can live in it for retirement. From now on, we will never be envious again. She always talks like shooting off firecrackers. Sam couldn't stop her in time. So blatantly. I learned of their scheme. I squatted down, touched her belly, and asked Sam with a light smile, "Why? Are you still thinking about your elder brother's house? Don't you think that since he is the son of a rapist, you are any better?" 20 Sam is the son of a liver cancer patient. His father had liver cancer that developed from hepatitis B. Sam was only 2 years old when his father was on his deathbed. After asking many people and no one was willing to take him in, they heard that I had picked up and raised an elder son and then sent him to me. After taking him in, we decided to move. We didn't want them to hear any gossip in the future and make them feel bad. Of course, it has to be admitted that I do have my own selfish motives. After losing my fertility, I so hoped to have 2 biological children. I would spare no effort to raise them up. Asking myself, in the past 31 years, I have exhausted all the strength of a mother. For them, I put away my irritability and tiredness and learned to speak softly like Charles. In order to take apart a few more zippers, I could rummage through the garbage dump again and again. In order to collect more construction waste, I blushed and learned to negotiate business like others. The accountants of those large waste recycling companies looked at me sideways and laughed. Oh, an illiterate woman is still learning to quote prices. I didn't feel bad when I heard this. I only felt proud. I am a mother. My 2 children will read a lot of books in the future, and will be more successful than them. But now, my younger son is really successful. He goes in and out with a group of foreigners and can speak foreign languages. But he has completely changed. The son whom I was thinking about and wanted to give a good future has long died. Raising a son who is an animal. Why should I blame my daughter-in-law for doing bad things? I sighed. My words were like swords. 21 things have come to this point. It is impossible to resolve it amicably. Sam got a bad reputation, and was fired by the company. He didn't dare to come and make trouble with me. So he drank alcohol and beat his wife. I heard that he even suspected his wife of cheating. In a fit of anger, his wife had an induced abortion and threw a chai and opened his eyes into the trash can of a small clinic. 27 years later, the child repeated his father's fate, and became an abandoned child. It's just a pity that there is no such sucker like me this time to hold him and send him off for the last time. When Charles learned the news, he smoked 2 bags of cigarettes in silence. He was uneasy. If I hadn't listened to your words and pretended at that time, would there be no subsequent events? While I was contacting a lawyer to recover the down payment for the 2 houses, I calmly told him, "No. You are not wrong. A son who is as useless as trash is better off not having one." 22 facts have proved that I am right. After receiving the court summons, Aaron came to me hypocritically. He was willing to return all the down payments and even the betrothal gifts. He only asked me to clarify for him that it was just a misunderstanding before. It seems that between being an official and keeping his wealth, he chose the former. I neither agreed nor refused. I just held Jason and kept wiping tears. This child was brought up by me, since he was born. When I thought about the hard life he would have to live in the future, how could I bear it? But Aaron misunderstood. He quickly transferred money to me and smiled with filial piety and sincerity. "Mom, don't worry. I and Jason will definitely serve you until you are 100 years old in the future." I took the money, withdrew the lawsuit immediately, and by the way, published the statement severing the relationship online. This time, no matter how much Aaron tried to clear his name, netizens only had one sentence: If you are not guilty, why are you in such a hurry to transfer money? To be honest, I don't care about his reputation anymore. I have done my best to love him. Now that I have given up on him, I have never regretted it. But he still didn't repent. Late at night, he broke into my house with a broken beer bottle. If it was like this earlier, why did it have to come to this? Who asked you to adopt me? 23 TSK. I sigh. Now, in addition to losing his job, he will also have to go to prison. The daughter-in-law never showed up again. She sold off all her family property and went back to her natal family directly. Sam was smarter. After being beaten up by his father-in-law's family, he got a divorce. With swollen corners of his eyes and hissing in pain every time he opened his mouth. I know it's all my fault. I deserve to lose my wife, child, and job. Please forgive me, okay? I really know I was wrong. From now on, I will definitely change. Forgiveness is impossible. But Sam was persistent. He followed me every day and picked up bottles meekly. Even when I deliberately passed by his former company, he silently picked up the cardboard thrown by others and said thank you with a smile. I was a bit confused. Could he be so humble just to avoid returning my down payment? That would be a miscalculation. From now on, money is my real son. No one can take away a penny. But he actually agreed and handed over all the money he had earned from collecting waste these days to me. Mom, you see, from now on, I will definitely change. He smiled and his eyes were full of hope. At that moment, I was a bit dazed. It seemed that I was back in those years when the children were innocent, kind, studious, and motivated. I smiled lovingly and faced the hidden camera on his clothes. Whether you change or not doesn't matter. If the down payment is not returned within 60 days, we'll just see each other in court. 24 At this point, I realized that in the hearts of the two brothers, we are indeed very stupid. Stupid enough to not even notice that he is taking videos and creating a repentant persona. Since when did it start? Since they got good grades and we applauded and said, "You are so amazing?" Since they had parent-teacher conferences and never allowed us to say that we were waste pickers, but had to say we were engaged in resource recycling? Or since they went to college and frowned and complained that the smell at home was too disgusting and asked me and Charles not to walk beside them when we went out? Looking back, everything has been traceable for a long time. We held them too high and could only mutter and admit Mom and Dad are old. Mom and Dad are an embarrassment to you. But who remembers that it is our lifelong support that has allowed them to stand in a glamorous place and smile with high spirits? Shaking my head, I sent the evidence of Jocelyn's extramarital affair and property transferred during marriage to San and turned away. For the upcoming dogfight. Let the lawyer witness everything. Charles and I are going to live our own lives.